My stepmother Judith yelled. Return what isn't yours. Venus. Her voice resonating across the opulent hall. You took my daughter's birthright. The lights in the crystal chandelier appeared to go out as everyone in the room turned to look at me. The champagne glass almost slipped from my hand as I remained still. My pulse thumping in my chest. As a 31-year-old pianist named Venus Carter, I never saw myself in charge of my father's manufacturing business. I'd entered the ballroom of the Westbrook Hotel for Judith's 55th birthday celebration an hour ago with the sincere intention of patching things up. 1 year had passed since my father's death, and the tension between us was oppressive. Upon receiving her invitation last week, I assumed she was at last prepared to proceed. I couldn't be more mistaken. This was an ambush, not a kind gesture. Whispers echoed through the throng as Judith stalked toward me, adding that Pamela should be in charge of the firm. When your father was ill, you took advantage of him, and he established that company for his kids. Among the sea of Houston's business elite, I urgently looked around the room for a friendly face. These were clients, suppliers, and community leaders who I had been dealing with for months, and they appeared to appreciate me. Now they gazed in astonishment and mounting disdain. I protested. That's not what happened. But even I sounded insignificant. Dad's will was obvious. He wanted to spend time with his real daughter. Judith, who played the piano and rarely visited him, interrupted me, as her words struck their point. Tears filled my eyes. Yes, I hadn't spent as much time at home as I should have. But I had been a professional tourer for years. I had to live with the guilt every day. But it was heartbreaking to hear it publicly. Pamela, my stepsister, was standing behind Judith, a smug look on her lips. Now, she nodded in agreement with everything her mother said, even though she had never expressed any interest in the company when Dad was still living. From an adjacent table, someone whispered, "She's right. You know, when Thomas became ill, she emerged out of nowhere." Which always struck me as odd. Said another voice. I felt the room enclose me as more voices joined the chant. There was a real booing. Minutes later, the murmurs had turned into a torrent of outright animosity. With the assurance of someone who knew she had won, Judith's voice became calm as she added, "I think you should leave. At this party, no one wants a thief." One notion solidified as I made my way to the exit, my legs shaking under me. I would not allow this to continue. Not tonight. Never. Ever. I reached my car before I started crying. I was sitting in the dark parking lot, gripping the driving wheel while I sobbed uncontrollably. The humiliation was unbearable to me. I had worked hard over the last year to gain the respect of Houston's corporate sector. And these individuals weren't just any old people. Thomas Carter, my father, spent 4 decades starting Carter Manufacturing from nothing. Following the death of my mother, Dad married Judith when I was 15, bringing her and Pamela, who was 12, into our lives. Before Dad was stricken with cancer 3 years ago, Judith had been the supporting wife. But following his diagnosis, everything changed. I recall him holding my hand when I sat next to his hospital bed. His voice was faint yet firm as he said, "Venus, Pamela doesn't have the same commercial acumen as you. She doesn't care about Carter Manufacturing, despite her intelligence. Yes, you do. I've observed your ability to comprehend what makes things function and to examine everything." Then he had gripped my hand. "I'm leaving the business to you. And I need your word that you'll manage it." To fulfill that commitment, I had sacrificed my touring career. When Judith and Pamela first heard the will, they appeared to agree with his choice. However, the undermining started within weeks. First subtly and then more obviously. Tonight was only the public result of a year-long effort to undermine me. My phone rang with a text from Bernard Wesley, my father's longtime lawyer and will executor. While I was wiping away my tears, "I just got the news. How are you? Give me a ring." My voice still trembling, I called right away and described what had happened that night. With his well-known baritone brimming with outrage, Bernard said, "This is unacceptable. Judith is fully aware that when your father made that will, he was in excellent mental health. We have a video of him describing his choices. She has unsuccessfully appealed the will 3 times. I said, "Bernard, they all believe her. Everyone in the room believes me to be a cunning robber. Bernard paused and asked the question that would make all the difference. Have you brought your laptop along? Perplexed by the change, I said, it's in my trunk. Well done. In 30 minutes. Meet me in my office. If Judith wants to do so. Let's share the whole tale with the public. Your father left behind every court file, document, and piece of evidence to protect you from this exact situation. I felt more than embarrassment for the first time since I had left the ballroom. A fire of resolve ignited in my chest. I remarked as I started the engine. I'll be there in 20. I parked in the parking lot of the Glass and Steel building downtown. And Bernard's office was still illuminated. He buzzed me in right away. And I saw him surrounded by folders and binders. I've been keeping these organized since your father died, he said, pointing to the carefully labeled papers. Thomas anticipated that Judith would do something similar. In this sense, he was strategic, considering several options before acting. Bernard grabbed papers while I walked the office. My guilt slowly giving way to wrath. Given that she has already challenged the will and failed, I fail to see why she would do this in public. What does she want to acquire? Bernard raised his head, his gray eyes intent. Take charge. Judith has always focused on social status and looks. She will attempt to undermine your position by inciting the business community against you if she is unable to get the firm lawfully. I whispered, remembering the nasty looks. She's succeeding. Not for long, Bernard said, rearranging the papers into fresh stacks. Your father kept a record of everything. Pamela repeatedly declared that she had no stake in the company. During your trip, he advised you to enroll in remote management courses. When you were at home, you two would have strategy sessions on the weekends. I took a USB drive from him. Your father's video testimonial explains his choice in this document. 3 months before his death, he taped it, especially to keep Judith from contesting his competence. I remembered that day and gripped the drive. Dad's thinking remained bright despite his weakness. Even though I was aware of this recording, I hadn't been brave enough to view it since his passing. And there's more, Bernard said. Financial documents show a 22% growth in the firm since you took control. Testimonials from staff members describe how you avoided layoffs when the Anderson contract failed. According to the board meeting minutes, you suggested that Pamela be appointed a director. But she turned that down since it would require too much tedious paperwork. A plan started to take shape in my head. Bernard, is your color printer still blazingly fast? He grinned as comprehension appeared on his face. Yes, it is. And I've got many binders. For the following hour, we collaborated to arrange indisputable records that accurately depicted the succession of Carter Manufacturing. Bernard printed copies of employee letters, financial statements, and court rulings. I put them in presentation binders. One for every gala table. Bernard called 3 of his colleagues while we were working. And they consented to meet us at the hotel. These reputable lawyers would give our proposal more authority. After we finished, Bernard said, this isn't just about clearing your name tonight. This is about securing your job for good. Judith will never be able to undermine you again after this. Just after 10 p.m., I looked at my watch. The gala would continue to go on. As I loaded the binders into Bernard's SUV, I made a statement. My father used to tell me that in business, you don't only defend yourself when someone attacks you. In response, you present such compelling facts that your opponent wishes they had never questioned you in the first place. Bernard flashed a grin. Tonight, he'd be proud of you. I drew in my breath. Let's leave. There was no sound on the trip back to the Westbrook Hotel. And while Bernard negotiated the Saturday night traffic in downtown Houston, my anxious energy filled the vehicle. In the rear seat were folders that seemed to hold my whole existence. My father's wishes, my diligence, and my validity. Remember, you're not just Thomas Carter's daughter today, Bernard reminded us as we drew up to the valet stand. You are in charge of Carter Manufacturing as CEO. At the door, Bernard's 3 co-workers joined us as we unloaded the SUV. The 4 lawyers in their immaculate suits created a strong image of a legal fortress around me. The doorman who had seen me run away in tears now moved aside, his eyes gaping. As we got closer to the entrance of the ballroom, my heart pounded. Inside, the gala seemed to go on as if nothing had occurred. Rich scent hovered in the air. crystal glasses clinked, and the string quartet sang a well-known waltz. However, the closest tables were silent as soon as I entered the doorway. Conversations died and heads turned as the quiet swept across the room like a wave. With a proud expression, Judith stepped next to the cake display. Holding a champagne flute, she stopped smiling when she saw me. Beside her, Pamela clutched her mother's arm and said something urgent. "Ladies and gentlemen," Bernard said, his commanding voice echoing around the room. "Excuse me for interrupting. I am Bernard Wesley, the executor of Thomas Carter's estate and his longtime attorney. I believe we need to clear up some confusion surrounding Carter Manufacturing." The quintet ceased their performance. Everyone in the room was staring at us. The legitimate CEO of Carter Manufacturing, Venus Carter, was the target of grave charges earlier this evening. Bernard said, "Presenting the legal and factual record is what my colleagues and I are here to do as court officials." My legs shook a little as we proceeded, while I went straight to the little stage where the foursome sat. The lawyers started handing out folders to each table. I took the microphone from one of the musicians. With a more steady voice than I had expected, I stated, "I faced accusations of stealing my father's company 2 hours ago. They accused me of manipulating and stealing. I was embarrassed in front of you all and jeered." I stopped, looking around the space. I couldn't get some of the visitors to look up at me. Others had wrinkled brows and opened the binders, seeming perplexed. My stepmother, Judith Carter, set up that situation. She has challenged my father's will 3 times in court. But she didn't disclose this to you. I gave Bernard a nod, and he displayed the court records on the big screen behind me. Every time, she was defeated because my father's desires were unambiguous and legally enforceable. Judith began to go in my direction, but 2 of Bernard's co-workers easily blocked her route. "I'd like you to hear from my father before you hear from me," I said. Bernard connected the USB drive to the sound system. After a little pause, my father emerged from his home study, looking thin yet alert. The image of my father emerged on the television, and the room fell silent. He sat upright in his leather chair, his once sturdy body now slender, his eyes still bright with intellect in spite of his sickness. There were several gasps. Not everyone had witnessed the extent of his devastation in his latter months. He said, "My name is Thomas Carter," in a forceful yet hoarse voice. This declaration was recorded on March 15 of last year in front of my lawyer, Bernard Wesley, and my mental competency was attested to by Dr. Catherine Wilson. After a quick panning to show both pros, the camera returned back to my father. "I founded Carter Manufacturing and serve as its CEO. After much consideration and preparation, I have made the decision to give my daughter Venus Carter a controlling stake in my business." Dad moved slightly and squirmed in pain. Then went on, "I would like to discuss my decision, as I believe it could potentially spark a dispute after my departure." Despite his inability to predict that Judith would be seeing this tape at her birthday celebration a year later, his eyes appeared to be fixed on her. Venus has proven to have the knowledge and drive necessary to be the head of Carter Manufacturing. Even though she is a pianist by trade, she has devoted many hours to studying the business, examining our processes, and comprehending our sector. At my recommendation, she took business classes, and she has demonstrated a strong talent for strategic planning. I wasn't even aware that I was being filmed when the movie shifted to me and my dad at the plant going over drawings and visiting with clients. Over the years, I have given Pamela, my stepdaughter, several opportunities to participate in the business, but she has consistently declined them. "I have no interest in spending my life making boring industrial parts," she said when questioned directly. The video then showed Pamela expressing those identical words while rolling her eyes over a family meal. Later, it showed her refusing a management training role during a taped meeting in her father's office. "I love both of my daughters," Dad went on, "but a business needs a leader who loves it. It's Venus's love. I am in excellent physical and mental health when I make this choice." When Dr. Wilson's qualifications showed beside her name, it was clear that Dad was mentally competent. At the end of the video, my father was staring straight into the camera. "I have faith that Venus will defend my legacy and the jobs that all of the employees at Carter Manufacturing have." When the TV went black, I scanned the room. There were now many visitors looking through the binders. Expressions of surprise and astonishment took the place of their previous assessment. I remarked over the microphone that Carter Manufacturing's revenue has risen by 22% since I took charge. Despite losing the contract with Anderson, we have increased 17 positions, entered 2 new markets, and avoided layoffs. Bernard showed me the financial figures on the screen when I nodded to him. Your binders page 12 has letters from our staff members, many of whom have been with my father for decades, endorsing my leadership. After taking a big breath, I went on. Pamela received a formal job offer 3 months ago on page 15, which was for a director role with considerable authority but fewer daily operational responsibilities. She said in an email that she had better things to do than waste time at a factory. So she declined. As several of the visitors turned to gaze at Pamela, I could see her face getting redder. I replied, my voice getting louder. The court rulings that dismissed Judith's challenges to my father's will are in the last section. There was no indication of improper influence or manipulation. According to 3 judges, when Dad made his choice, the medical papers attested to his complete competence. I moved forward, setting the microphone aside for a second, and turned to face Judith, who was motionless next to the cake display. As loud as I could, I screamed, you asked me to return what isn't mine. Yet, as these records unequivocally demonstrate, Carter Manufacturing is in my hands. Just as my father intended. I took up the microphone once again and turned to speak to everyone in the room. I am aware that many of you fell for deception this evening. You reacted based on insufficient knowledge after hearing only one side of a complex tale. I stopped, allowing my eyes to wander across the ballroom. That's not your fault. I do, however, suggest that you consider the material carefully before passing any more conclusions. The room had become a different place. Anguish and shame had taken the place of the animosity. Our biggest customer, Gregory Thompson, got up from his seat at the table. His voice echoed across the room. Venus, I owe you an apology. I should have been wise enough to reject such grave charges without further investigation. His public recognition felt like a catalyst. As they flipped through the binders more carefully, other guests started chatting among themselves. At a rear table, someone began to applaud gently, and others followed suit. At last, Judith burst through the lawyer's barrier and came charging at me, Pamela following closely after. Who dares you? In a low, spiteful voice, she hissed. You've transformed this birthday party into a business pitch. Thomas should never have left you the firm for just this reason. You're lacking in manners and class. I grinned composedly, aware that everyone was watching us. Judith, it's an intriguing point of view. Given that you publicly accused me of stealing at your own birthday celebration and had me evicted. You deceived him during his final moments. Pamela uttered, her voice quivering with fury. You weren't even present. With his iPad in hand, Bernard took a step forward. In fact, according to the hospital and hospice facilities visiting logs, Venus paid your father 83 visits in the last 6 months of his life. You came 12 times, Pamela. According to these identical data, you came 37 times. Mrs. Carter. Pamela's mouth moved back and forth, but she didn't say anything. With all pretense abandoned, Judith eventually stated that the firm was intended to safeguard our future. Thomas promised to always take care of us. I firmly answered, and you are. Dad left you both a sizable portion of his estate. He created trusts that guarantee you won't ever have to worry about money. In order for them to hear me, I dropped my voice. Because he was aware of the consequences, he refrained from giving you authority over his life's work. Judith's face twisted with anger. I briefly feared that she might hit me. Instead, she took hold of Pamela's arm and started dragging her in the direction of the door. She tossed it over her shoulder. But it's not over yet. Well, Bernard called after her. And it is. We will seek sanctions for any additional legal challenges that are considered vexatious litigation. There was a noticeable release of tension in the room as they vanished through the doors. Guests began approaching me to apologize and congratulate me on the company's success. Some acknowledged that they hadn't felt confident enough to speak up, but they had always thought Judith's story was suspect. Before retiring, Edward Winters, the previous CFO who had spent 20 years working with my father, came to join me. Thomas was correct about you, he added, holding my hand tightly. He has his backbone in you. He used to remark that while you possess your mother's brilliance, you also possess his commercial acumen. Tears pricked my eyes, but they weren't tears of shame. I'm grateful, Edward. For me, that is everything. As the night progressed, people surrounded me with encouragement instead of contempt. Bernard stood close by, his smile showing his delight. The lawyers went to work gathering the binders. They'd done their job. What's next? When the gathering slowly stabilized, Bernard inquired. I glanced around the room at the business elite of Houston, many of whom would play a key role in the future success of Carter Manufacturing. Now, I network, I remarked, erecting my shoulders. Tonight, after all, I'm more than simply Thomas Carter's daughter. At Carter Manufacturing, I serve as the CEO. Judith's terrible birthday banquet was 6 months ago. Not only did that night change the way the business community saw me, but it also changed the way I saw myself. Returning to that ballroom with facts and proof continues to transform me. Carter Manufacturing has surpassed my most optimistic expectations in terms of growth. A number of visitors contacted me with potential business prospects after the event. Gregory Thompson's business increased their order, and 3 hesitant previous clients signed long-term agreements. In addition to adding 32 new workers, we have opened a second location in Austin. Nobody anticipated what would happen to Judith and Pamela. 2 weeks following the event, Pamela unexpectedly arrived at my workplace. Sitting opposite me, she twisted her hands anxiously. I'm in need of work, she stated plainly. For those legal issues, Mom has spent the majority of her own funds, and it will take another 3 years for my faith in Dad to fully develop. I looked at my stepsister's face, looking for deceit, but all I saw was despair. Why come to me, particularly in light of all that has transpired? Because you are the only one who is truly successful, she unwillingly acknowledged. In Mom's social circle, everyone else is acting. I refused Bernard's suggestion and gave Pamela a low-level job offer in our marketing division. She agreed, which surprised me even more. And she has proven to be genuinely skilled at the job. Although we'll never be friends, we're becoming more respectful at work. Judith, however, departed Houston soon after the dinner. She relocated to Phoenix and is allegedly looking for a new wealthy widower there. Since then, our paths have not crossed. And I don't think they will in the near future. My personal life has changed in equally important ways. Music has been who I was for years. Through my early years of loneliness following the death of my mother, the uneasy mingling of families when Dad married Judith, and the demanding schedule of conservatory and touring, the piano was my constant friend. I believed that I was only taking a little hiatus when Dad became ill, and I stopped performing. But something unexpected has come to me as a result of owning Carter Manufacturing. Creating employment, fixing issues, and taking on leadership challenges are all things that make me happy in ways I never would have imagined. Although I still play the piano, generally late at night after finishing my work for the day, my connection to music has changed to become less performative and more intimate. Dad would have been proud of what I did last month. In order to offer music instruction to Texas's poorest schools, I founded the Thomas Carter Foundation, combining all aspects of my life into something worthwhile. The foundation also offers budding entrepreneurs business mentoring, playing my father's favorite Chopin nocturne on a grand piano we had brought inside the factory. I gave my first public performance since taking over the firm at our launch ceremony. I was more aware of my father than I had been since his passing as I played amid the machinery he had constructed, surrounded by the workers whose jobs he had guaranteed and whom I now guarded. I came to see that inheritance is about both contributing our own special contributions and preserving the greatest aspects of the people we have lost. Not simply about possessions and riches. Today, the corporate sector that previously mocked me cites Carter Manufacturing as an example of ethical leadership and innovation. The business is doing well. Pamela is figuring things out. And I've found a new balance between my past self as an artist and my current self as an entrepreneur. As Dad often said, we earn some legacies rather than steal them.